In 1 Kings 16:34 and Joshua chapter 6 verse 26, the Israelites established Jericho by sacrificing their kids. 34 It was during his time that Hiel of Beit El rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundation at the cost of his firstborn son Abiram and erected its gates at the cost of his youngest son Segub. This was in keeping with the word of Adonai spoken through Jehoshua the son of Nun. 26 Jehoshua then made the people take this oath, a curse before Adonai on anyone who rises up and rebuilds this city of Jericho. He will lay its foundation with the loss of his firstborn son and set up its gates with the loss of his youngest son. To overcome a curse, they sacrificed their sons, based on an oracle of Adonai to Joshua of Nun. We'll see below that Robert Graves' The Greek Myths proves Sir James Fraser's The Golden Bough in spades, and proves a lot of astronomical basis to at least Greek myths. We'll see that rulers extended their time to be king for the day. But I want to say something more about magic. One of the major ways of getting rid of evil and disease by magic is by putting someone's soul, or the disease on a boat, or a container, and throwing it in the sea or river, hoping it will go far away, or sink to the bottom of the sea where nobody can get to it. Getting back to Göbekli Tepe not being that astronomical, and really, the fact that by the time of the Greeks, the mythology was astronomical. The Old Testament starts with the creation of the universe by God. But before we get to Genesis, there's how the gods concept evolved out of magic. Hippocrates of Kos, of Hippocratic oath fame, wrote The Sacred Disease. They who first referred this malady to the gods appear to me to have been just such persons as the conjurers, purificators, mountebanks, and charlatans. Men regard its nature and cause as divine from ignorance and wonder. But if it is reckoned divine because it is wonderful, instead of one there are many diseases which would be sacred. Such persons, then, using the divinity as a pretext and screen of their own inability to afford any assistance, have given out that the disease is sacred. Adding suitable reasons for this opinion, they have instituted a mode of treatment which is safe for themselves, namely, by applying purifications and incantations. All these they enjoin with reference to its divinity, as if possessed of more knowledge, and announcing beforehand other causes so that if the person should recover, theirs would be the honor and credit, and if he should die, they would have a certain defense, as if the gods, and not they, were to blame. These quotes prove so much. He proves that anything they don't know is attributed to the gods. He shows that if the person gets well, they say they were right, and if the person dies, they just say, God works in mysterious ways. And, he states the conjurers, the purificators, hence the magicians attributed the malady to the gods. We'll get back to gods and magic after we show the Genesis creation story. Consciousness of astronomical things can be seen in the Genesis chapters of the Bible. The first thing to consider is that it is flat Earth. I've already pointed out a biblical passage proving they thought the Earth is flat Earth. A major highlight of the Genesis creation of the universe account is Gen 2:2, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. God is supposed to be infinite. Job chapter 36 verse 26, how great is God, beyond our understanding. The number of his years is past finding out, and here God needed to rest. Infinity doesn't need to rest. Besides not understanding the mathematics of infinity, they don't seem to be conscious of what contradiction is. In Genesis chapter 1, animals come before man. In Gen 1:11 and 1:25, animals are introduced first. Then, man and woman are created after in Gen 1:27. But, in Genesis chapter 2, man comes before animals and woman. General 2:7 introduces man. Then, plants are formed later in Gen 2:8-9. Animals are made in Gen 2:19. Women are made from the rib of a man after plants and animals are introduced in Gen 2:22. More creation story contradictions are that God creates living creatures out of waters or ground respectively. In Gen 1:20, God makes living creatures out of the water. In Gen 2:19, God creates living creatures out of the ground. But what really proves these contradictions is the literal translation of God and Lord. The literal translation of God in Hebrew is Elohim, a Canaanite god. Lord in Hebrew is Adonai, a Phoenician god. The Hebrews combined the two to make their one God. General 126 actually equates many gods with their one God, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." God is singular, and he says in our image, which is plural. The fact that they say, "in our image," also proves that this God is made up by the Bible writers themselves. A Xenophanes quote proves that people make up their gods in their own image. But if cattle and horses and lions had hands or could paint with their hands and create works such as men do, horses like horses and cattle like cattle also would depict the gods' shapes and make their bodies of such a sort as the form they themselves have. Ethiopians say that their gods are snub-nosed Simis, and black Thracians that they are pale and red-haired. Even more explicit statements that the Bible's God is made up in Psalms 115, 2-4. Psalms 115-2, "Wherefore should the heathen say, Where is now their God? But our God is in the heavens. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands." This says the heathens invented their gods as silver and gold statues, and the Hebrews invented their God and placed him in the heavens, where they hoped he'd be safe from being disproven. Elohim has a goddess wife, Asherah. And a couple of big things that generally don't get talked about in churches is that the Old Testament is 1, trying to get rid of magic, and 2, Asherah and other gods like Baal. This is possibly the earliest Venus figurine. It's doubly special because she's holding a tally stick. The tally stick has 13 marks. Ancient people variously thought there were 8, 12, 13 constellations. Getting 13 as the number of moon phases per year back then was pretty good. Archaeologists have found lots of Venus figurines all over the Mediterranean. They date anywhere from 30,000 years to 4,500 BC. As far as I know, the last Venus figurine was at the Great Malta ruins. And we see the largest Venus figurine by far. The Malta ruins also have amazing carved-out underground chamber tombs.